May 30th, 1967. A man walks up and says a few words. No gunshots, no explosions, just a voice. But those words would end a country. Because in that moment, Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu didn't just make an announcement, he broke Nigeria in two. He declared that the eastern region was no longer part of Nigeria, but a new nation, the Republic of Biafra. And the moment those words left his mouth, there was no way he could take it back, because those words were said with seriousness and the protection of his people. No negotiation that could reverse it, no speech that could calm it down. This wasn't just politics anymore. This was fear. This was survival. This was a country already bleeding from the 1966 coup and counter-coup, finally tearing apart. From that moment on, Nigeria had only two options left: stay together by force or fall apart completely. But that decision didn't start on May 30th. It had been building for months. Long before Biafra was declared, Nigeria was already unstable and already cracking under pressure. So in January 1966, the military overthrew the civilian government. Then, just 6 months later, another coup. But this time, it didn't stop at power. It turned into something far worse. Across northern Nigeria, violence broke out, and it wasn't random, it was targeted. Thousands of Igbos living in the north were attacked, hunted, and killed. Estimates vary, but historians place the number somewhere between 30,000 and 50,000 Igbos were killed. The message was clear: the Igbos are no longer safe in the north. So they ran for their lives. Entire families were left behind overnight. By the time it slowed down, over 1 million Easterners had fled back to the east. Not with hope, but with fear, with anger, with stories that spread faster than any official statement ever could. And that's when something broke. Not the country on paper, but the idea of it. For Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu, who was leading the eastern region at the time, this was the moment that changed everything. Now he wasn't just a military governor, he was responsible for people who believed completely that staying in Nigeria could get them killed. So negotiations started. Attempts to hold the country together. There were various meetings, agreements, and promises, but none of it held. And eventually, he made a decision. Not just for political reasons, but for strategic to restore his people hopes. And of course, in his mind, this decision was necessary, because from where he stood, this wasn't about creating a new country for pride, it was about survival. On the other side of the events, the calculation looked completely different. To Yakubu Gowon, allowing Biafra to leave wasn't just a loss, it was a threat to the entire country. Because if one region walked away, what stops the others? And then there was something even bigger at stake: the oil, the power, and control. So from Gowon's perspective, stopping Biafra wasn't optional, it was necessary. You see, tough decisions like this require seeing things from both sides of the coin. That's the part Gowon and Ojukwu missed. Both sides believed they were right. Both sides believed they had no choice. Which means by the time Biafra was declared, this wasn't a disagreement anymore. It was a collision. The moment the situation reached that point of collision, war wasn't a possibility. It was inevitable. The war officially began on July 6, 1967. At first, the Nigerian government called it a police action, like it was something small, something like an agitation that can easily be contained. Gowon's idea was simple: move in quickly, suppress the secession, and restore control. Little did he know that the plan would collapse almost immediately, because the situation didn't stay small. Within weeks, it turned into a full-scale civil war.
A lot of people would think Nigeria attacks first, but that's where most people get it wrong. Biafra attacks first. You see, Biafra didn't start by defending. Instead, they went on the offensive. In August 1967, Biafran forces launched what became known as the Midwestern Offensive. They crossed the Niger River, moved into the Midwest region, and captured Benin City. From there, they pushed west toward Ore, in present-day Ondo State. At that point, they were less than 200 kilometers from Lagos. That wasn't symbolic anymore. That was a real threat to the federal capital. For a brief moment, it looked like Biafra had momentum, but that window of momentum didn't open for too long. The Nigerian government reorganized their troops, and by September 1967, federal troops launched a counteroffensive. They pushed Biafran forces out of the Midwest, retook Benin City, and forced a full retreat back across the Niger. That was the turning point, the moment Nigeria troops saw the window opened, because from that moment on, the balance of the war shifted. Yakubu Gowon now had time to think and seek backing from foreign powers. Britain supplied arms, ammunition, and diplomatic support. The Soviet Union provided aircraft and heavy weapons. Egyptian pilots even flew missions for the Nigerian Air Force. That meant air superiority, and it also meant that Nigeria can sustain the war pressure. Meanwhile, on the other hand, Biafra didn't have those backings, and if they had limited external support. Recognition from countries like Gabon, Tanzania, Ivory Coast, Haiti, but recognition isn't the same as supply, and in war, supply is everything. So Nigeria began advancing systematically. City by city, Nsukka fell early by July 1967. Then Enugu, the Biafran capital, fell in October 1967. Because the pressure was so strong from the Nigeria troops in the manner in which they used to conquer Biafran territory, Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu was forced to relocate deeper into Biafran territory, and with each loss, Biafra became smaller, more isolated, and more exposed. By 1968, federal forces had surrounded most of Biafra's territory. That's when the Nigeria troops changed strategy. This wasn't just about capturing land anymore. It was now about cutting Biafra off completely. No imports, no aid, no supplies, and no way out. Now Nigeria changed the strategy, and this strategy is not just to win the war, but to end it. This led to a total blockade. Land, sea, air, like nothing was getting in. No food, no medicine, no fuel, and no way out. At this time, the war had changed completely, because it wasn't just soldiers fighting, it was civilians dying. By 1968, Biafra was effectively cut off from the world. What little food remained ran out fast. Markets disappeared, farms couldn't function, and people started starving. Not metaphorically, like people were literally dying of hunger. Images began to leak out. Children with distended stomachs, stick-like limbs, and their hair losing color. That's a condition called kwashiorkor. This kwashiorkor condition became the face of the war. A protein deficiency so severe, the body begins to shut down. And the numbers? They're not small. Estimates suggest between 1 and 3 million people died during the war. The majority of them were civilians. Most of them did not die from bullets, but from hunger. This wasn't just a war being fought with guns, it was being fought with starvation. Relief efforts did exist. The International Committee of the Red Cross and other groups attempted to deliver aid. There were nighttime airlifts into Biafra, risky, improvised missions, bringing in food and medicine, but it wasn't enough, not even close to what they really need. This wasn't just a humanitarian issue, it was political. The same global powers that backed Nigeria militarily weren't about to undermine that support. Britain maintained its position, the Soviet Union continued supplying arms, and most governments treated Biafra as a rebellion, not a nation worth saving. So intervention stayed limited, careful, controlled, and while the world debated if they should help Biafra or not, people were dying every day. By late 1969, Biafra was running out of everything: land, food, and time. What started as a bold breakaway had been pushed back piece by piece. Territory lost, supply lines gone, no access to the outside world, and more importantly, no realistic path to victory. By January 1960, it was over whether anyone said it out loud or not. And then came the final decision. Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu left. He went into exile in Ivory Coast, not as a victory, but as a safety exit. Before leaving, he handed control to his second-in-command, Philip Effiong.
Effiong understood what was left, or more accurately, what wasn't. No army that could hold, no civilians left to endure more suffering, no reason to keep fighting a war that had already been decided. So he didn't delay it. He didn't try to stretch it out. Within days, he made the call. A call to surrender. On January 15, 1970, Biafra officially laid down its arms. And just like that, after nearly 3 years of war, it ended. Not with a final battle, not with a dramatic last stand, but with acceptance. Biafra was gone. After the war ended, the Nigerian government moved quickly to control the narrative. Yakubu Gowon made a statement that would become one of the most quoted lines in the country's history. No victor, no vanquished. On the surface, it sounded right. It suggested unity, reconciliation, a chance to move forward without revenge. And to some extent, it worked. Nigeria didn't break apart again. But that wasn't the full reality. Because for many of the people coming back from Biafra, there was nothing to return to. Homes were gone, businesses destroyed, entire communities wiped out. And then there was the money. Bank accounts that held life savings before the war were reduced to a flat payout. No matter how much you had before, you are given £20. Think about that. Years of work gone overnight. Rebuilding wasn't just difficult. For many, it was starting from zero in a country they no longer fully trusted. And the deeper damage that didn't show on the surface. Although, while the fighting stopped, the division didn't just disappear. It went quiet. Even today, the name Biafra still comes up in conversations, in protests, in political tensions, which tells you something important. The war ended in 1970. But what caused it? The fear, the distrust, the unanswered questions, those didn't end. If you really want to understand Nigeria today, you can't ignore the Biafra War. When you look back at it, the Nigerian Civil War wasn't just about land. It was about people who no longer felt safe in their own country. It was about leadership decisions made under pressure and the consequences that followed. One thing we must understand is that countries don't collapse in a single moment. They don't just wake up one day and fall apart. They break slowly. When trust is lost, when fear replaces unity, when people start seeing each other as threats instead of citizens. By the time Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu made that declaration in 1967, Nigeria was already on the edge. The war didn't create the division, it exposed it. Nigeria as a country didn't just survive that war, it's still living.